Stay with your kind." The words came low and venomous, Lady Augusta's lips scarcely moving behind a fan of painted ivory. "You will keep to the back of the room, Rosalind, among the companions and the poor cousins, and you will not so much as lift your eyes to the dice. The Queen does not receive girls who smell of the still room." Rosalind Vane kept her chin level, and her gloved hands folded, because the alternative, pressing her thumbnail into her palm until the small pain steadied her, would have shown, and her stepmother fed on every shown thing. Around them the Queen's drawing room blazed. 200 beeswax candles in the great chandeliers threw a heavy gold light over silk and powder and nodding ostrich plumes, and the heat of a London evening in late June pooled beneath the painted ceiling so that the whole vast chamber seemed to breathe like something living. Somewhere far ahead, past the crush of hooped skirts and the glitter of orders on men's coats, sat the Queen herself, and to be bowed before her was the single ambition that had driven this household for a 12-month. "I had no intention of lifting my eyes anywhere," Rosalind said. "See that you do not." Augusta drew her glove smooth along each finger, one after another, the way she always did before she cut. "You are here because Honoria required a second pair of hands for her train, and for no other reason on this earth. Remember it." The crowd surged, and a footman in royal scarlet pressed them sideways toward the long windows, where the lesser guests had been left to wilt. Rosalind let herself be moved. It was a skill she had perfected, being moved, taking up no room, folding herself into the margin of a page already covered in someone else's hand. Her half-sister Honoria swept ahead in oyster satin, plumes trembling, and did not look back. 3 summers Rosalind had lived under her stepmother's authority. 3 summers since her father had been laid in the cold churchyard at Vane Abbas, and the whole of his estate had passed, by the terms of a settlement no one had thought to question, into Augusta's careful keeping. Rosalind had her quarterly pin money, her small attic room with its north light, and the run of the kitchen gardens. She had told herself, more nights than she could number, that it was enough. The lie wore thinner every year. A draught of warm air carried the green smell of crushed leaves up from her own sleeve. She had been pressing larkspur that afternoon, blue as a held breath, and a faint ghost of it clung to her, despite the lavender water. The still room. Augusta was right about that, at least. There, her stepmother murmured, satisfied, surveying the wallflower corner to which they had come. "Your kind." Then she turned, and was gone in a hiss of silk, and Rosalind was alone among the discarded. "She has the manners of a fishwife, and the soul of a money-lender," said a dry voice at Rosalind's elbow, "and I have loved every dreadful moment of watching her climb. Do sit, child, before you fall. There is a chair behind you that no one of consequence will fight you for." Mrs. Tabitha Finch was a widow of 60, with a face like a clever apple, and a turban the precise colour of mustard. She had been a poor relation of someone for 40 years, and had outlived all of them, and she occupied the corner of every great room she entered, as though she had purchased it outright. "I am quite able to stand, Mrs. Finch," Rosalind said. But she sat, and the relief of it ran up her spine like cool water. "Of course you are able. You are able to do a great many things, which is precisely why she keeps you in the dark like a forced hyacinth." Mrs. Finch produced 2 glasses of negus from a passing tray with the slate of hand of a conjurer and pressed one into Rosalind's grasp. The glass was warm and sweet-smelling, clove and wine and hot water, and Rosalind drank because her throat had gone dry as paper. "Tell me, did she let you eat today, or is Honoria's train more deserving of nourishment?" "I had bread." "Bread?" Mrs. Finch made the word into a small indictment. "When your father was alive you had partridge, and a dancing master, and a French maid who wept when she was turned off. I remember it. I dined at Vane Abbas the summer you were 19, and you sketched the whole table from memory afterward, and got Lord Carrow's wig so exactly that I could not look at the man for laughing." Rosalind's mouth curved despite herself. "I had forgotten." "You have made a discipline of forgetting, which is a great waste in a woman who notices everything. The old lady's bright eyes moved over the room, weighing, pricing, dismissing. He left it all to her, your father. The kindest fool that ever drew breath. He thought a stepmother would be a mother. He thought a great many things. Rosalind set the glass down on the windowsill with care, so that it made no sound. Below the window, the palace gardens fell away into blue dusk, and the chained heat of the day was lifting at last, carrying up the scent of stocks and warm gravel. I do not wish to speak of it tonight. Not here. No, quite right. Tonight we shall watch the show and say wicked things under our breath, which is the only proper use of a court. Mrs. Finch settled her shawl. Though I confess I am curious what brought you out at all. She has hidden you for 3 seasons. Why drag you to a drawing room now, where the whole world might see Sir Henry Vane's daughter dressed like a governess? It was the very question Rosalind had not let herself ask. She looked down at her gown, sprigged muslin, 3 years out of fashion, the only thing in her press fit for court, and that only because Mrs. Finch's own woman had altered it in secret. Around her the great ladies glittered like a treasure house spilled across a floor. I do not know, Rosalind said slowly, and that frightens me more than I can say. My stepmother never does a thing without a reason. If she has brought me into the light, it is because she means to use the light against me. She felt him before she saw him. It was not a thing she could have explained to Mrs. Finch, or to anyone, that across a chamber crowded with 200 souls she should suddenly be aware of one, the way one becomes aware of a change in the weather before a single cloud has moved. The fine hairs rose along her arms. She turned her head, slowly, as though her body had decided the matter without her. A man stood near the great doors, half a head taller than the men around him, and he was looking at her. For one moment the whole gilded room narrowed to the plain dark line of him among the peacocks. He wore no orders, no jewels. His coat was a deep midnight blue, severely cut, and he held himself with the stillness of a man who has learned that he need never raise his voice to be obeyed. The candlelight caught the strong plane of his cheek, the grave set of his mouth, and Rosalind's heart turned over once, hard, like a key in a lock. She knew that face. She had bound the cut above that brow with a strip of her own petticoat. She had sat by that man through 3 nights of fever in the gardener's cottage at Vane Abbas, in the wet green chill of May, when a hired horse had thrown him in the storm-flooded lane, and he had crawled to her door with mud to his throat, and a name he gave her between his teeth, Mercer, he had said. I am Gabriel Mercer. And nothing more. And she had not pressed him, because a man does not lie about his suffering even when he lies about everything else. For 3 weeks she had brought him broth and dry linen, and the small county news, and they had spoken of plants, of all things, of the bee orchids she had found on the chalk, and the way the light fell at 4 o'clock through the cottage window. And then one morning he had been gone, with no word, no letter, nothing but a sprig of blue larkspur, left pressed flat inside her own sketchbook where she had not put it. She had thought of him every day since, and called herself a fool for it. Child, said Mrs. Finch. Very low, you have gone the colour of that wall. What is it? Nothing. The word came out cracked. A man. I believed I knew him once. I was mistaken. For he could not be here. A horse-thrown traveller in a borrowed coat did not stand at a queen's drawing room with the crowd parting around him like water around a stone. She had nursed a Mr. Mercer. This man belonged to another world entirely, and the two could not be the same, and the small wild hope rising in her chest was a thing she crushed at once, the way she crushed everything that might be seen. He had not stopped looking at her. A movement ran through the chamber, a stiffening, a turning. The presentations were beginning. Now, breathed Augusta, materializing from the crush with Honoria in tow, her face alight with the only joy Rosalind had ever seen warm it, the joy of ascent. Stand straight, Honoria. Hold the train high. Rosalind, behind her, and when she has made her courtesy you will gather the satin and step back, and you will not. The gloved hand smoothed itself, finger by finger. You will not embarrass this family before the Queen of England. Do you understand me? Perfectly, Rosalind said. They moved into the slow river of the procession. Ahead, the dais rose beneath a canopy of crimson and gold, and upon it sat a small, upright, weary woman in grey silk and a fortune of diamonds. The Queen, her plumes white as frost. Her dark eyes missing nothing as one daughter of the realm after another sank before her. The Lord Chamberlain's voice rolled out the names like a tolling bell. Each lady advanced, swept to the floor in the deep court courtesy, kissed the royal hand, and withdrew backward, never turning, the whole intricate machine of deference grinding on. Rosalind's heart beat in her throat. The heat, the candle smoke, the press of plumes, and the heavy sweetness of 100 perfumes, it had begun to swim. She fixed her eyes on Honoria's oyster train and held to the one task she had been given. Miss Honoria Vane, called the Chamberlain, presented by her mother, the Lady Augusta Vane. Honoria glided forward. The courtesy was flawless. Augusta had drilled it for months. The Queen inclined her head a careful half-inch. And Rosalind, stepping in to gather the fallen satin, felt the whole room arranged around her like a held breath. And into that breath the Chamberlain's voice came again, but altered, uncertain, because what was happening was not in the order of things. For a man had stepped out of the line of waiting peers and was crossing the open floor before the dais. Crossing it the wrong way. Toward the windows. Toward the wallflower corner. Toward her. His Grace, the Chamberlain said, and then faltered, and then recovered. Because one did not falter here. The Duke of Ashbourne. Ashbourne, the Premier Duke of the North. A name Rosalind had read in the papers, Mrs. Finch smuggled to her. Ashbourne, who had been abroad, who had been ill in the spring, who never came to town, who answered to no one but the King. The Duke of Ashbourne had Gabriel Mercer's face. He walked the length of that gilded room in a silence so complete she could hear the hiss of her own blood. Every eye turned. Plumes swung. Fans froze half-furled. The Queen herself had gone still upon her dais. One bejeweled hand lifted a fraction from the arm of her chair, watching this man break the most rigid choreography in England as calmly as if he were crossing his own park. He stopped before Rosalind. He was close enough now that she could see the small white seam of the scar above his brow, the one she had stitched, and the grave dark eyes that had watched the 4 o'clock light with her in a gardener's cottage 100 years and 2 months ago. He looked at her as though there were no one else beneath that painted ceiling, as though there were no queen, no court, no order of precedence written in blood and centuries. And the Duke of Ashbourne bowed to her, not the half-inclination one gave an equal in passing. He bowed from the waist, deep and deliberate and unhurried, the bow a man makes to royalty, to the throne, to the one fixed point in his sky, and he made it to Sir Henry Vane's discarded daughter, in her 3-year-old muslin, before the Queen of England and the whole assembled peerage of the realm. A sound went through the room like wind through wheat. Rosalind could not breathe. She was aware of Honoria's mouth fallen open, of the satin train slack in her own nerveless fingers, of Mrs. Finch somewhere behind her giving a single delighted gasp. And she was aware, with a dreadful and absolute clarity, of her stepmother, of Augusta gone white to the lips, of the gloved hand pressed flat to her bodice, of the venom that had hissed "Stay with your kind" not 10 feet from this very spot, now curdled into something closer to terror. "Your Grace," Rosalind whispered. It was all she had. Miss Vane. His voice was exactly as she remembered it, low and even. A voice that did not need the room to be quiet to be heard, though the room had gone quiet for it all the same. "I have been searching for you since May." "You," she wet her lips. "The Queen was watching. 200 souls were watching. You gave me another name. I gave you a true thing wrapped in a false one." Something moved behind his eyes, swift and unguarded, there and gone. "I owe you a great deal more than an apology, and I find I am not willing to pay it quietly, in a corner, where she has put you." He did not so much as glance at Augusta, and somehow that was worse for her than any glance could have been. "Will you permit me to set it right?" Across the chamber the Lord Chamberlain had recovered his voice and was murmuring urgently to her equerry. Upon the dais, the Queen lifted one finger, and the murmuring stopped. Her dark gaze travelled from the Duke to the girl in the outmoded gown, and back again, sharp as a needle, and the whole court hung upon what Her Majesty would choose to do with a protocol shattered at her own feet. "His Grace of Ashbourne," said the Queen, in her accented English, in a voice pitched to carry to the farthest plume, "appears to have forgotten where he is." "No, madam," said the Duke, and turned at last to face the throne, putting Rosalind at his side as he did it, at his side, in full view, where an hour ago she had not been fit to lift her eyes. "I have remembered exactly where I am, and to whom this kingdom owes a debt it does not yet know of. I would beg leave to name her." Augusta's gloved hand found Rosalind's wrist and closed on it, hidden in the folds of satin, hard enough to leave a mark. "Say nothing," she breathed, so low it was scarcely sound at all. "Whatever he is to you, whatever you imagine you are to him, you say nothing, you stupid girl, or I will see you ruined before the candles are out." But the Queen of England had already leaned forward upon her crimson chair, and her needle-dark eyes had come to rest on Rosalind's face, and into the vast and waiting silence of the drawing-room she said the words that made every road back close at once behind her. "Then, name her, Ashbourne. We find we should very much like to know whose daughter has been standing in our shadow all this while, and why our court has been at such pains to keep her there." The Duke of Ashbourne did not answer at once. He let the silence stretch, not from uncertainty, Rosalind thought, but because he had calculated to the inch how much a silence was worth in this room, and meant to spend every farthing of it. Then he inclined his head toward the throne, and when he spoke his voice carried without effort to the gilded cornices and the lowest footman by the door alike. "Madam, she is the daughter of the late Sir Henry Vane of Vane Abbas, in Wiltshire. In the spring of this year, when I lay near to perishing of fever in a labourer's cottage on her father's land, with no name worth the giving, and no claim upon her charity, Miss Rosalind Vane nursed me through 3 nights with her own hands, and asked nothing of me in return, not even the truth." He paused. "I have come to think a kingdom that cannot find room at the front of a room for such a woman has arranged its furniture very ill." A ripple of sound, half scandal, half delight, ran along the ranks of plumes. Somewhere a fan snapped shut like a pistol cock. Rosalind's face burned. She felt the heat climb her throat and flood her cheeks, and she could do nothing. Nothing at all, but stand there in her 3-year-old muslin, with 200 pairs of eyes flaying her where she stood. Augusta's fingers had not loosed her wrist. The grip ground bone against bone beneath the satin. "A pretty speech," said the Queen. She did not smile, but the needle-dark eyes had warmed by a degree, the way iron warms before it shows colour. "And uncommonly long, for a man who is said never to use 10 words where one will serve. Come here, child, let us look at you, since His Grace insists we must." For a moment Rosalind could not make her feet obey. Then Augusta's hand opened, flung her free, in fact, with a tiny shove disguised as a release, because to be seen clutching at her now would have been ruin of another kind, and Rosalind stepped out across the open floor alone. The carpet was crimson under her worn slippers. The days climbed before her. She remembered, from some buried hour of childhood drilling under a long-dead governess, the angle of the deep court courtesy, and she sank into it with her eyes lowered and her heart slamming, the muslin pooling around her like spilled milk among all that silk. She held it. Her knee trembled. She held it. "Rise," said the Queen. She rose. Up close the Queen was smaller than the room had made her, a tired, shrewd, watchful woman weighted down with diamonds, and her gaze went over Rosalind's face the way a jeweller's loop goes over a stone, for flaw, for facet, for worth. "You have a steady hand and a poor dressmaker," Her Majesty observed. "The first we approve. The second, is no fault of yours, we think." Her glance flicked, just once and very deliberately, to where Augusta stood frozen at the edge of the cleared floor, and the whole court followed that glance like hounds following a thrown glove. "Sir Henry Vane. We recall him. A gentleman. We were sorry to lose him from the county lists." The eyes came back. "Were you provided for, Miss Vane, on your father's passing? It was a trap, or a gift, or both?" And the answer that rose to Rosalind's lips was the true one, and the true one would open Augusta's whole house to the daylight here, now, before the assembled peerage. She felt the Duke's stillness at her shoulder. She felt Augusta's terror across the floor, like heat off a hearthstone. "I want for nothing a person of sense requires, madam," Rosalind said. "I have my health, and the run of a garden, and one friend who tells me the truth." She did not look at the Duke. "It is more than many possess." The Queen regarded her a moment longer. Then, astonishingly, the corner of the royal mouth moved. "Diplomacy," she said, in muslin 3 years old. "You are your father's daughter after all." She lifted one finger, and the Lord Chamberlain glided in like a ship answering her helm. "Miss Vane is presented. See that her name is entered." And Ashbourne, the finger turned upon him, ringed and unhurried. "You will attend us before you leave, that we may learn what else you have neglected to mention. We dislike surprises in our drawing room. We dislike still more discovering we have enjoyed one." "Madam," said the Duke, and bowed. It was over. The machine of deference, jolted from its track, ground back into motion. The Chamberlain called the next name. The river of presentation resumed as though nothing had cracked the floor of the world. But everything had changed, and every soul in that chamber knew it, and as Rosalind withdrew, backward, careful, never turning, as the form required, she walked through a corridor of stairs that had been emptiness an hour before, and were now, suddenly and terribly, full. The Duke fell into step beside her at the edge of the crowd. "Breathe," he murmured, for her alone. "You have done the hard part." You stood. "You have undone me," she said, very low. Her smile fixed in place for the watchers, because she had learned long ago that the face must lie when the rest of you cannot. "Do you understand what you have done? You have made me a spectacle. By tomorrow there will not be a drawing room in London that is not chewing my name." "Yes," he said. That was rather the point. She turned her head and looked at him fully then, this man who wore Gabriel Mercer's scar above a duke's cold composure, and found she did not know him at all. The crush carried them apart before she could answer. A countess she had never met laid a hand on her sleeve and said something warm and meaningless. A young man with too many fobs bowed over her glove and begged an introduction, and through the shifting bodies she saw Augusta, white and rigid by the long windows, watching her with an expression Rosalind had never once seen on that face in 3 years of careful cruelty, and it took her a moment to name it, because it was so wholly out of place there. It was fear, naked, calculating fear. And fear, in Augusta, Rosalind knew, was the most dangerous thing of all. The carriage home was a closed box of silence and August heat. Honoria sat with her plumes crushed against the squabs, and her face turned to the dark glass, saying nothing, which was itself a thing without precedent. Augusta sat opposite, very upright, her gloved hands folded in her lap, and she did not smooth them finger by finger. She did not move at all. The lamplight slid across her in yellow bars as the wheels jolted over the cobbles, and she watched Rosalind with that same fixed, deliberate attention a cat gives a thing it has not yet decided whether to play with or finish. The house in Brook Street swallowed them. The footman took the wraps. Honoria fled up the stairs without a word, and Rosalind, every nerve singing for the refuge of her north attic, had got one hand to the banister when her stepmother spoke. "My sitting room." Now, the fire had been let to die to embers, economy, even on this night of all nights, and the small room smelt of cold ash and the wax of a single candle. Augusta shut the door herself. For a moment she stood with her back to it, and the candle flame stood straight and unwavering between them, and the silence had teeth. "Tell me everything," Augusta said. "From the beginning. The cottage. The fever. What passed between you. What you said to him. What he said to you. What is written. What is promised. Everything, and do not trouble to lie, because I shall know it, and it will go the worse for you. There is nothing to tell that he did not tell the Queen of England an hour ago. Do not be a fool with me." Augusta crossed the room. She did not raise her voice. She never did. It was one of the things that made her terrible. But she came very close, and the candle threw her shadow vast and shaking up the wall. A duke does not cross the floor of a drawing room for a girl who gave him broth. He does not search 2 months for a still-room drudge. There is something between you, and I will have the shape of it. Because whatever it is mine to manage now. Yours, something in Rosalind, worn thin by 3 years and snapped clean through tonight, lifted its head at last. You have managed everything else of mine. My father's house, my father's money, the very gown on my back, which is 3 years old, because you would not spend a guinea to clothe me. What is left that you have not already taken? The slap did not come. Augusta's hand rose, Rosalind saw it rise, and did not flinch, and that not flinching was its own small victory. And then the hand lowered, because Augusta had not survived and prospered by leaving marks where a servant might see them. "You think tonight has freed you," her stepmother said softly. "Let me cure you of it. A duke's notice is not a settlement. It is not a name, nor a roof, nor a shilling a year. It is gossip, Rosalind, and gossip is a fire that warms a man and burns a woman to the ground. He will tire of his pretty story of the cottage, as men do. He will marry where his blood requires, and it does require, more than you know, and you will be left with nothing but a ruined reputation and the memory of one evening when the whole world looked at you. I have seen it a dozen times. I will not have my Honoria's season wrecked because a girl who smells of larkspur let a great man turn her head. He turned nothing, but the words rang false even to Rosalind's own ears, because her heart was still going hard and high, and the memory of his low voice, "Breathe, you have done the hard part," would not be put down. No? Augusta studied her, and slow understanding spread across that beautiful cold face like frost across a pane, and with it came something that was almost, horribly, satisfaction. Oh, you poor creature. You care for him. She gave a small laugh, no louder than the candle's hiss. That is better than I had hoped. That I can use. Use how? Rosalind heard the tremor in it and despised it. But Augusta only smoothed her gloves at last, finger by finger, the old gesture, the cutting gesture, and turned for the door. "Go to bed," she said. "You will keep to the house tomorrow. You will receive no one. You will write nothing and send nothing. And when I have decided how this is to be played, I shall tell you your part in it, and you will perform it exactly, because the alternative, my dear, is that I put you on the next coach to your aunt in Yorkshire and tell the whole of London that you ran mad with vanity and had to be removed. Sleep well." The door closed. Rosalind stood alone in the dying ember dark, her hands at last unfolding, her thumbnail pressing hard into her palm where no one could see, and let herself shake. The morning came hot and white, the sky over the chimney pots already a hammered metal haze by 8 o'clock. Rosalind woke to the sound of the door knocker, and then again, and again, a steady tattoo of brass on brass that did not let up. She lay in her narrow bed under the north window and listened to it, and to the rising murmur of the footman turning callers away below, and understood that the fire Augusta had spoken of was already lit. She had been forbidden the house. She kept to it. She pressed flowers she did not see, and read a page of botany 4 times without taking in a word, and twice she went to the small window and looked down into the baked little garden where the stocks hung limp in the heat, and told herself she was not waiting. It was Mrs. Finch who broke the siege. She arrived at noon in a hired chair, mustard turban first, and routed the footman by the simple expedient of walking past him, and was halfway up the stairs calling Rosalind's name before Augusta could intercept her in the hall. "Lady Augusta, how well you look, quite haggard." Mrs. Finch beamed up from the half landing. "No, do not trouble to send her down. I shall go up. At my age stairs are a moral exercise, and I will not be cheated of them. Rosalind, child, where are you?" There was nothing Augusta could do, before the servants, before a guest of standing, but acquiesce with a face like a shut book. Rosalind came out onto the landing, and Mrs. Finch took both her hands and squeezed them hard, and said under her breath, with her bright eyes dancing, "My dear, you have done it now. The whole town has gone off like a rocket. Take me somewhere your dragon cannot hear, and tell me you have not promised that beautiful man anything foolish." In the cramped attic, with the door shut and the heat pressing down through the slates, Mrs. Finch sat upon the single chair, and Rosalind upon the bed, and the old lady laid it all out like cards. 3 things you must know, and quickly, before she comes up with some errand to part us. First, a knobbed finger went up. Ashbourne attended the Queen for a half-hour after you had gone, and came out grave as a churchyard, and went straight home, and has admitted no one since. No one knows what passed. Speculation is a torrent. Second, a second finger your stepmother spent this morning, before she barred her own door, writing letters. 6 of them. My woman had it from her woman, sealed and sent by hand to 6 houses, and I should dearly love to know to whom. A woman does not write 6 letters at dawn for pleasure. She is building something. And the third? Mrs. Finch's face changed. The mischief went out of it, and what was left was old and shrewd and kind. The third is the one you will not like. There is a name being spoken alongside his, and has been this 12-month, in the houses that decide such things. Lady Sabrina Court, the Earl of Wexcombe's daughter. Beautiful as a frost morning, and twice as cold. And her people and his have lands that march together along 40 miles of the northern border. It has been understood, not announced, mind, never announced, but understood, that the 2 estates would be joined when Ashbourne took a wife. The fathers settled it between them years ago, over the heads of the children, as such things are settled. She paused. He bowed to you before the Queen, child, but there is a great deal that is settled about that man that a bow does not unsettle. Rosalind sat very still. The heat hummed in the slates. Below, faintly, she heard the door knocker go again, and the murmur of refusal. "I see," she said. "I doubt that you do. Quite. But you will." Mrs. Finch reached over and tapped her on the knee. "I am not telling you to despair. I am telling you to keep your wits, which are the best part of you, and not to hand your whole heart across before you know what game is on the table. Yours is not the only player who wants something here. He wants something. She, a tilt of the turban toward the floor, toward Augusta below, wants something. And the cold Earl's daughter, depend upon it, will want something the moment she reads the morning's news. You are the new piece on the board, my dear, and a new piece is either a queen or a sacrifice, and which one it shall be is not yet written. The letter came at 4 o'clock, at the slack low hour when the heat lay heaviest, brought up by a parlour-maid who had clearly been told to bring it secretly, and was frightened half out of her wits to be doing it. It was a square of heavy cream paper, sealed with a plain dark wax and no device, a private seal, not the ducal arms, and across the front, in a strong upright hand she had last seen nowhere, because he had left her no letter at all, was written only, Miss Rosalind Vane, her own name, in his hand. She broke the seal with fingers that would not be steady. "Miss Vane, I have no right to ask it, and ask it none the less. There is a small gate at the foot of the garden of Ashbourne House that gives on to the green walk by the water. It is unlocked at 6, when the household dines. I shall be there at 6, and for as long after as a man may decently wait, and a little longer than that. I have things to say to you that I will not entrust to paper, having already learned what comes of writing nothing at all. If you do not come, I shall understand it, and trouble you no further, and be sorry all my life. G. She read it 3 times. Then she sat with it pressed flat between her 2 palms. The way she pressed her flowers, as though she could keep it from fading by the force of her holding. To go was impossible. She was forbidden the house. She was watched. To be caught walking out alone to meet a man, this man, at this hour, in this storm of talk, was precisely the ruin Augusta had threatened, and the ruin Mrs. Finch had warned of, the fire that burned a woman to the ground. There was a settled understanding, lands that marched together 40 miles, a cold, beautiful earl's daughter, who would by now have read the news. There was every reason in the careful, ordered world to fold the letter small and put it in the back of her press and never speak of it. She thought of the 4 o'clock light through a cottage window. She thought of a sprig of larkspur pressed flat in her sketchbook by a hand that had given her a false name and gone. She thought, he owes me a true thing, and so do I owe myself one, before I let them all decide what I am. At 5:45, while the household sat down to its early dinner, and Augusta's eye was on her soup, Rosalind Vane went down the back stair in her plainest bonnet, slipped the kitchen bolt the cook never minded, and stepped out into the white evening heat alone. The green walk by the water lay golden and empty in the long light. The Thames ran sluggish and bright beyond the railings, smelling of warm mud and tar and the green rot of summer weed, and the plane trees hung still overhead, not a leaf turning, while somewhere a thrush ran through its evening phrases over and over as though it could not let them go. Her own footsteps on the gravel sounded enormous to her. Her heart was a fist against her stays. The gate in the high wall stood ajar. He was there, on the green side of it, bare-headed, his dark coat thrown off, so that he stood in his shirt sleeves like the man from the cottage, and not the man from the drawing-room at all. And when he saw her come round the bend of the walk, he went very still, the way he had gone still across the gilded room, as though stillness were the only way he had of holding something too large. "You came," he said, "against every particle of my sense." She stopped a careful 3 feet from him, her gloved hands folded, because the folding was armor, and she needed it. "Your Grace, Gabriel." The word came rough. "In the cottage you called me Gabriel. I have thought of very little else, these 2 months, than the sound of it. In the cottage you were a man named Mercer, who had been thrown from a horse." She heard her own voice shake, and steadied it by main force. "I do not know who you are. I nursed a stranger, and lost 3 weeks of sleep over him, and woke one morning to find him gone without a word. Gone. With no letter. Nothing. Only a flower left in my book, as though I were a chapter you had finished. And then you walk across the Queen's own floor, and break the whole world over my head, and expect me to what? To be grateful? To be glad?" The folded hands had come unfolded. She pressed them flat to her skirts. "Why did you leave me, if you mean now to do this? Why no word in 2 months, and then all the words at once, before the Queen of England, where I could not refuse them?" He took the blow without flinching, which she had not expected, and when he answered, his grave dark eyes did not leave her face. "Because the morning at the end of those 3 weeks," he said, "when I knew where I was at last, and whose hands had pulled me back, a rider came up the lane from the north, with letters that had been chasing me for a fortnight. My father was failing. His jaw worked. I had hours, perhaps, to reach him. I left you sleeping in the chair by the fire, because I could not wake you to say a thing I had no time to say properly, and I was a coward, Rosalind, and I have hated myself for it every day since. I left the larkspur because it was all I had, and I told myself I would come back within the week and say everything. And then he was gone, and there was a dukedom on my shoulders I had never thought to carry so soon, and 100 men and 1,000 acres looking to me. And 2 months vanished like water through a hand before I could come and look for you, and when I came to Vane Abbas, they told me Miss Vane was in London, presented at court, and he stopped. I could not wait. That I might do it quietly. I had waited too long already, and I had seen, even in 3 weeks, the way they keep you. I would not slip in by the back of a room to a girl they had hidden at the back of a room. I am sorry for the spectacle. I am not sorry I would not be quiet about you. The thrush sang on. The river slid past, golden brown, and Rosalind stood with 2 months of bitterness coming apart in her chest like a knot worked loose, and was angry at how much she wanted to believe it. "There is a lady," she said. "Lady Sabrina Court. Lands that march with yours. An understanding between your fathers." Something crossed his face, not guilt, she thought, but a weariness so deep it was almost grief. "Who told you that? Is it true?" "It is true that it was understood, by my father and hers." He said it evenly. "It is true that I have not contradicted it, because until 2 months ago I had no reason to, and a great many reasons not to. 40 miles of border, and 100 families' livelihoods, and a promise a dying man believed he had made for the good of everyone in it." His eyes held hers. "It is not true that I am pledged. There is no contract. There has been no offer made on my side, and there will be none. But I will not lie to you and tell you it is a small thing or an easy one, because you nursed me without a single lie, and you deserve the same. To break it will cost. It will cost me, and it will cost others who have done nothing wrong, and Lady Sabrina herself, who is not, whatever you may have been told, a cruel woman, only a proud one, and who has expected to be a duchess since she was a child. And you tell me this," Rosalind said slowly now, "after the beau. After the Queen. After all London has my name in its teeth, and there is no door left open behind me." "Yes." He did not look away. "Because I would rather you hate me for the truth than thank me for a comfortable lie. I learned the difference in your cottage, Rosalind. You were the first person in my life who wanted nothing from me. Not my name, which you did not have, nor my fortune, which you did not know of, nor anything but to see a stranger mended. Do you know what that is, to a man in my place? I have been weighed and priced since the day I was breeched. You weighed me for nothing but whether I would live. I am not," his voice caught, and he mastered it. "I am not able to give that up and go quietly into a marriage of marching lands. I find I am not able. That is the whole of it, and it is selfish, and I have laid it at your feet because I do not know where else in the world to put it." For a long moment neither of them spoke. The light had gone from gold to amber along the water. The heat was lifting at last, and a first cool breath came off the river and stirred the hanging leaves, and carried to her, faint and impossible, the green crushed smell of larkspur from somewhere along the wall. "I do not know whether to believe you," she said at last. "Honestly, I want to, which is exactly why I dare not. Yet, you have set my whole life alight, Gabriel, and I do not yet know if you have done it to save me or to please yourself, and until I know," she got no further. For behind her, on the gravel of the public walk, a carriage had drawn up unheard beneath the thrush and the river, and a voice spoke, a woman's voice, light and clear and edged like cut glass, pitched to be heard and to wound. "How very pastoral," said Lady Sabrina Court. "The Duke of Ashbourne in his shirt sleeves, at a garden gate, with a still-room Cinderella all the town is mad for. Do go on. I should so hate to have interrupted the declaration." Rosalind turned. A young woman stood at the railings in pale lavender silk, parasol furled, fair and lovely and cold as a frost morning, exactly as she had been promised, and her gaze went over Rosalind once, head to slipper, pricing every inch of the 3-year-old muslin, and behind her, stepping down from the same carriage, with a smile of pure and dreadful triumph spreading across her beautiful face, in travelling dress she had no business wearing at this hour, unless she had been brought here on purpose to witness exactly this, was Lady Augusta Vane. "There," said Augusta softly, to the cold girl at her side, and not to Rosalind at all. I told you in my letter you had only to come and see for yourself. Now, what shall we do with her? Rosalind felt the gravel shift beneath her slippers as she turned fully to face them, and the cool breath off the river that had felt like mercy a moment before now ran down her spine like the touch of a wet hand. Lady Sabrina Court stood at the iron railings with her parasol furled tight as a closed fan, her pale lavender silk taking the amber light without warming to it, and her smile was the smile of a woman who has arrived precisely on time to a performance she has paid handsomely to see. Behind her, Augusta had come through the little wicket in the railings as though she owned the green walk, the river, and the evening with it. Lady Augusta. Gabriel's voice had gone flat and cold, the voice of the drawing room and not the cottage. He did not move to take up his coat from where it lay across the gate. You have followed your stepdaughter through the streets like a bailiff. I had not thought even you would stoop so low for a morsel of talk. Stoop. Augusta tasted the word and found it pleasant. She drew one glove smooth along her fingers, finger by finger, and the small familiar gesture turned Rosalind's stomach over. Your Grace mistakes me. I have not followed her. I have brought a witness. There is a great difference, and it is the difference that will matter when this is told. Told to whom? To everyone, of course. Lady Sabrina's clear voice cut across them, light as struck glass. She tilted her head and considered Rosalind from bonnet to hem with the unhurried attention one gives a length of cloth one has no intention of buying. Forgive me, I am trying to understand the article. The whole town has been at fever pitch since last evening, and I confess I expected something rather more. A beauty hidden away, perhaps, some pearl your stepmother had cruelly concealed. Her gaze finished its slow descent and lifted again, all polite bewilderment. But you are only a girl in an old gown, who smells, if you will pardon me, faintly of a kitchen garden. I cannot make the figures balance. A duke crosses the floor of the Queen's own drawing room for this. The thrush had stopped singing. In its place, Rosalind heard the river slapping at the stones below the railings, and the creak of the carriage springs as the coachman shifted his weight, and her own breath coming too high in her chest. She kept her chin level. She kept her gloved hands folded, because the folding was the last wall she had, and she pressed her thumbnail hard into her palm inside the kid, where none of them could see it, and the small clean pain held her upright. I do not balance any figures for you, my lady, Rosalind said. I came to walk by the water. You came in a carriage with my stepmother, having read your morning's news. Of the two of us, I think it is not I who has gone out of her way this evening. Something flickered across that frost-pale face, surprise, swiftly mastered. Sabrina had not, Rosalind thought, expected the article to speak. She has a tongue, Augusta observed to no one in particular, with the weary satisfaction of a woman whose worst predictions have been confirmed. I have spent 3 years filing it down, and still it will cut. Sabrina, my dear, do not let it draw you. It is the one thing she has, and she spends it freely, because she has nothing else to spend. Augusta. Gabriel's word landed like a stone dropped in still water. You will not speak to her so in front of me. Will I not? His own coldness she met with a coldness older and better practiced. She came 2 steps further onto the green walk, and the low sun threw her shadow long across the grass to lap at Rosalind's feet. Your Grace has had her 3 weeks, and now an evening. I have had her 3 years. I know precisely what she is, and what she is not, and what she may be made to do when the alternatives are laid before her plainly. You know nothing of her but a sickbed and a pretty fancy. Do not presume to instruct me in the management of my own household. She is not your household. She is her father's daughter. Her father, said Augusta, very softly, is past instructing anyone. The words fell into the amber light and lay there. Rosalind felt them go through her the way cold goes through thin shoes. She had heard her stepmother cruel 1,000 times, in 1,000 turns of phrase honed to nick without leaving a visible mark. But there was a flatness to this that was new, and she understood with a lurch that Augusta was frightened enough now to abandon the long game of small cuts and reach instead for the blade she kept sheathed. "Say what you have come to say," Rosalind told her. "You did not bring Lady Sabrina to a garden gate to admire my complexion. You wrote her a letter this dawn. 1 of 6. So she has told us, by coming. What is the bargain, Augusta? You never appear without a bargain in your reticule." Augusta smiled. It was a genuine smile, and it was the most dreadful thing Rosalind had seen all evening. "There," she said, almost fondly. "You see, Your Grace, she is not a fool. It is the only respect in which she has ever pleased me. Very well. Plainly then, since plainness is the fashion at this gate." She turned, deliberately, so that she addressed Gabriel, and not Rosalind, as a person settling accounts speaks to the one who holds the purse. "Your Grace is in some difficulty. You bowed last night before the Queen of England to a girl with no portion, no settlement, and no name to speak of beyond her father's, who was a pleasant nobody. You did it, I must suppose, in a fit of feeling, gratitude, conscience, the heat of a crowded room. And now you find the morning has come, and with it the reckoning, and there are 40 miles of northern border, and an earl's daughter, and a promise your late father made, all waiting upon what you do next. My father's promises are mine to keep or to break. How modern of you." Augusta inclined her head. "But you will not break this one, not when the breaking of it is laid out before you with the cost attached. Lady Sabrina, tell His Grace what you told me this afternoon, when you did me the honor of answering my letter in person. Tell him what your father is minded to do." For the first time the cold girl at the railings hesitated, and in that hesitation Rosalind saw, clearly, for she had spent 3 years learning to read the small movements people made when they were less certain than they wished to seem, that Lady Sabrina Court did not relish being made Augusta's instrument any more than Rosalind did. The realization steadied her oddly. There was more than one piece on this board that had not chosen its own square. "My father," Sabrina said, recovering her glass-edged poise, "is an old man who has counted on a thing for 15 years. The joining of the lands. He has built upon it, drainage, the new road, the mill at Heatherby, all of it laid out on the understanding that the 2 estates would be one inside the year." She lifted her chin. "If His Grace withdraws now, publicly, having made me the laughing-stock of every drawing-room from here to the border, my father will not be gracious about it. He has tenants and obligations and a long memory. There are a great many people along 40 miles of country who will feel it, in their rents and their work and their winters, if 2 great houses fall to quarreling because a duke took a fancy to a still-room maid at a court reception. That is not a threat, Your Grace. It is arithmetic. You above all men know how arithmetic falls upon the people who cannot do it for themselves." And Rosalind watched Gabriel take that blow, and saw it land where the others had not, saw the muscle move in his jaw and the stillness come over him that she had learned, in a gardener's cottage, meant he was holding something too large to set down. He was a builder of things. She had heard it even through his fever, the way he spoke of his land, his men, his 1,000 acres looking to him. Sabrina had found the one ledger he could not balance against his own wanting, and she had read the column aloud, and it was true. That was the horror of it. It was true. "You see," said Augusta, watching his face with the same attention, "he is counting. He is a good man, your Duke, and a good man can always be made to do a cruel thing if you can persuade him it is a kindness to enough strangers. That is the trouble with goodness. It is so very easy to leverage." "Stop," Rosalind said. But Augusta had not finished, and Augusta's pleasures were few and slow, and she meant to have all of this one. She turned back to Rosalind at last, and the amber light was going grey now along the water, and the first lamps were being lit somewhere behind the high wall of Ashbourne House, so that a thin warm glow climbed the brick. "Here is the bargain then, since you asked for it so prettily. You will go to your aunt in Yorkshire. Yes, I know. You have heard me threaten it before. But this time it is no threat. It is the merciful door I am holding open for you. You will go quietly, of your own seeming free will, tomorrow, before the Wexcombe reception on Thursday, at which this whole sorry business is to be either mended or made permanent. You will leave a note, in your own hand, which I shall help you to compose, saying that you found the world's notice not to your taste, and have retired to the country to recover your health. And in exchange, she drew the glove smooth, finger by finger. I shall say nothing. Of the cottage, of the 3 weeks. Of a young woman alone, unchaperoned, with a strange man under her roof, nursing him in his shirt sleeves through the nights of May. The river slid past. Far out on the water, a wherry's oars knocked in their locks, and a man's voice called something to another man, ordinary and far away, from a world where people were not being slowly taken apart at garden gates. There was nothing in that cottage but illness and broth, Rosalind said, and hated the way her voice had thinned. There does not need to have been anything. Augusta's patience was almost gentle. You know that as well as I. You have lived 3 years in the world I live in. It is not what was, child. It is what can be made to sound. 3 weeks. A handsome man. No mother, no maid, no soul to swear to your conduct but yourself. I have only to let it fall, here and there, in the right ears, with the right small frown, and you are finished, not retired, finished. A thing no respectable door opens to again. And so, I am very much afraid. Is he, for having ruined you, and then paraded you before the Queen. Whereas if you go quietly to Yorkshire, you are merely a modest girl who could not bear the glare. Do you see the kindness of it? I am offering you a way to be forgotten instead of destroyed. It is more than I owe you. It is nothing you owe her, Gabriel said, low and dangerous, and nothing in your power to grant. I will speak for her conduct. My word. Your word will marry her then. Augusta turned on him, swift as a snake. Now? Tonight? Before Thursday? Will you stand up at Wexcombe's own reception, before the Earl whose daughter you have shamed, and announce that the Duke of Ashbourne weds a portionless nobody he nursed his fever with, and let the whole North pay for it? Will you? She waited. 1 heartbeat, 2, and the silence answered for him, because he was an honest man, and an honest man cannot lie quickly enough. No, not tonight, not Thursday, perhaps not at all, when you have slept on your arithmetic, and every day you do not. She stands here in the open with her reputation in your hand and nothing of her own, which is precisely how you found her, your Grace, and precisely how you will leave her, if you are the good man you are at such pains to seem. It was Lady Sabrina who broke the terrible little silence that followed, and she broke it almost gently, which was somehow worse than her earlier malice. There is one thing more she ought to know, Sabrina said, before she decides anything. In fairness, since we are all being so plain, she furled her parasol tighter, not looking at Rosalind now, but at Gabriel, and her cold pretty face had something in it that might, in a warmer woman, have been pity. Did he tell you, Miss Vane, how he came to be thrown from a horse in your particular lane, in your particular county, in the spring? The cool off the river had become a chill. He was travelling, Rosalind said. The storm. He was travelling to Vane Abbas. Sabrina let it lie a moment in the dusk. His man of business wrote to the Wiltshire attorneys in April. I know it, because my own father's agent had the next desk, and remarked upon it. The Duke of Ashbourne was making inquiries into the late Sir Henry Vane's estate, into the settlement, into a younger daughter left, most curiously, without provision of any kind. She tilted her head. He did not come into your lane by the accident of a storm, Miss Vane. He came to your county on purpose, asking questions about you, weeks before any horse threw him at your door. The words went into Rosalind very quietly, and did their work very slowly, the way the worst things always did. She did not cry out. She turned her head and looked at Gabriel, at the man who wore Mercer's scar above a duke's grave face, who had said in the cottage, I am Gabriel Mercer, and nothing more, who had left a sprig of larkspur in her sketchbook and crossed the floor of a drawing room and said, "Breathe. You have done the hard part." And she watched his face, and she saw it. She saw the thing she had spent 3 weeks trusting, because he had never lied to her with it. She saw the truth arrive there before he could arrange it into anything else. "That is not," he began. "Is it true?" Her own voice came out of her very flat and very far away. "Did you make inquiries into my father's estate? Before the lane? Before the fever? Did you come to Wiltshire knowing my name?" The river ran. The lamps climbed the brick. He did not look away from her, and she gave him that much in the ledger of her own heart, even as the rest of it came apart, that he did not look away. "Yes," Gabriel said, "and no. Both are true, and you must let me give you both, or you have only the half that damns me." "Give me the half that damns you first," Rosalind said. "I have had a great deal of practice with it." A muscle moved in his jaw. Behind him, Augusta had gone very still, the still of a hunter who sees the quarry walk of its own accord toward the snare, and Rosalind hated, with a sudden and cleansing fury, how much she had become a thing that other people watched walk into traps. "I made inquiries into the Vane estate in April," he said. "That is true. I came into Wiltshire because of them." "That is true. I did not come for you. I did not know there was a you, not as you are. I knew there was a name in a settlement. A younger daughter. A wrong that wanted righting. What wrong?" The question cracked out of her before she could weigh it. "What wrong in my father's settlement is the business of the Duke of Ashbourne?" And there it was. She saw it the instant she had asked, saw the answer rise to his face, and saw him decide, in the space of a breath, that he would not give it. Not here. Not before Augusta, whose eyes had narrowed to slits, and Sabrina, who had gone still herself, the dawning understanding plain upon her that whatever leverage she had brought to this gate, she had brought also a key to a door she had not known was there. "I cannot tell you that," Gabriel said, "in this company." "You cannot tell me," Rosalind repeated. "Not here. Not with her listening." A jerk of his head toward Augusta. "If I say it now, I undo a thing it has taken me 2 months to build, and I put a weapon in the worst possible hand, and I cannot, Rosalind. I am asking you to trust me one more time, for one day, until I can. Trust you." She laughed, and the sound of it frightened her, because she had not known she had such a laugh in her. "I have just learned that everything I believed was chance, was design. That you came to my county hunting some secret in my father's papers, and found me in the bargain, and made of me, what? A convenience? A lever to pry yourself loose from 40 miles of border you never wanted. A pretty story to tell the Queen so that all the world would look at Ashbourne and not at the marriage he means to escape." Each word came faster, and she could not stop them. 3 years of being moved and folded and used pouring out of her at last, in the worst of all possible hours. "And now you ask me to trust you for one more day, while you keep your secret in your closed hand, exactly as she keeps my father's money in hers. Exactly as everyone in my life has kept the one thing I needed to know just out of my reach, because it suited them. No, no, Your Grace. I am done being the piece other people move. It is not like that." He took a step toward her, and she took one back, and the gravel ground under her heel, and he stopped at once, the stopping itself a kind of wound. "Whatever I came for, it stopped being that the first night you sat up with me. I swear it to you. The inquiries are real, and the reason for them is real, and it is yours, Rosalind. It is for you. It is the opposite of the thing they are making it sound. But I will not buy your trust by spilling it at this woman's feet for her to use against us both. I have made one mistake of cowardice already, when I left you sleeping. I will not make the opposite mistake of recklessness now, and lose you the very thing I came to give. I am asking you to wait. One day, and I am telling you," Rosalind said, "that I have waited 3 years for someone to put the truth in my hand, and not one of you ever has. and I will not wait a single hour more." She heard Augusta exhale, a small sound, almost a sigh, the sound of a thing going at last the way it had been arranged to go. She heard Sabrina say nothing at all, which from Sabrina was its own commentary, and she felt the river cold and the lamp warmth on the two sides of her face, and she understood that she stood at a place from which there were only bad roads, and that the choosing of one of them was, perversely, the first wholly free act she had been permitted in 3 years, and she meant to make it herself. "Here is what I will do," she said, and her voice had steadied now, gone quiet and even, the quiet that her own steadiness made, and not the quiet anyone had imposed on her. "I will not go to Yorkshire, Augusta. I will not write your note. You may say what you like of the cottage, say it, and be answerable for the saying, but I will not buy your silence with my own exile and call it a mercy." She turned to Sabrina. "And I am not your rival, my lady. Whatever my stepmother has told you, I have no claim on this man, and I want none I have not been given honestly, in the daylight, with nothing kept back. You may tell your father that the still-room maid declines to be the cause of his quarrel." And last, hardest, she turned to Gabriel and looked at the scar she had stitched and made herself say it. "And you will keep your secret one more day, you say. Then keep it, but do not look for me at the gate again, and do not write me your true things wrapped in false ones, because I find I no longer know which half of you is which, and I have spent quite enough of my life loving a man I had to assemble out of guesses." It was only when she had said it, loving, that she heard what she had said, and so did he. She saw the word go through him. But she was already turning, already walking back along the grey walk toward the wicket in the railings, her own footsteps enormous in her ears, the thrush mercifully silent, the river indifferent, and she did not turn round, because she knew that if she turned round and saw his face, she would not be able to keep walking, and the keeping walking was the only piece of herself she had left to hold. Behind her she heard Augusta's skirts, hurrying to catch her up, the triumph in them turned brittle now, with something Rosalind could not at first name. It was only when her stepmother fell into step beside her at the wicket, breathing a little hard, and hissed under her breath, not in victory, but in a low, vicious fear that had not abated but sharpened, that Rosalind understood the evening had not gone as Augusta had planned either. "You little fool," Augusta breathed. "You were meant to take the Yorkshire road. You were meant to be biddable for once in your wretched life. Do you know what you have done? You have refused everyone. You have made yourself a piece that answers to no hand, and a piece that answers to no hand, child, is the one piece every player on the board will agree must be taken off it." Her gloved fingers closed on Rosalind's wrist, in the old place, hard. "He knows something about your father's settlement, about the money, about me. That is what those April inquiries were. Do you understand now why I cannot let him near you, why I cannot let this go on a single day longer? It is not your reputation I am protecting. It was never your reputation." And there, at last, in the grey light by the carriage, with the lamps of Ashbourne House burning over the wall behind them, and the man she had walked away from standing somewhere in their glow, Rosalind heard the true thing fall from the one mouth she had never expected to give it to her, and felt the whole shape of the secret turn under her like the deck of a ship, and knew, with a cold and absolute certainty, that whatever wrong slept in her father's papers, it was Augusta who had the most to lose by its waking, and Gabriel who had crossed 3 counties to wake it, and herself who stood, all unknowing, directly upon the seam where the two of them would tear. The carriage door stood open. Honoria's pale, frightened face hung in the dark of it like a moon, and from the green walk behind the wall, faint and clear over the indifferent river, came the sound of a gate being closed, not slammed, but shut, deliberately, by a man who had decided something, and Rosalind, climbing up into the dark and the August heat and the silence of her stepmother's fear, understood that whatever happened on Thursday at the Wexcombe reception, all of them would be there, and the truth with them, and that there was no road back now from the thing she had set walking by, refusing, for the first time in her life, to do as she was told. Thursday came in on a wall of heat. By 9, the sky over Brook Street had whitened to the color of a kiln, and the cobbles threw their warmth back up into the closed house, so that even the marble of the hall was no longer cool to the hand. Rosalind sat in her attic with the window thrown wide and not a breath coming through it, the pressed larkspur from Tuesday, gone papery and dull on the sill, and listened to the brass knocker below go and go and go, and to the footman turning the callers away. She had not slept. She had lain in the heat, with the garden gate words turning in her, his and Augusta's both, and somewhere past 4 o'clock she had stopped trying to decide which of them had lied least, and started, instead, to be very still and very awake, the way she went still over a difficult seedling, when forcing a thing only broke it, and waiting was the whole of the art. The door opened without a knock. Augusta stood in it, dressed already for the evening, though the evening was 9 hours off, in dove grey silk with jet at her throat, and her face had the smoothed, sealed look it took on when she had finished being afraid and begun, instead, to act. "You will not come tonight," she said. "I have thought it through. Honoria and I go to Wexcombe. You remain here. The doors are watched. If you are seen to leave this house, I will tell the first ear I meet that you slipped out to a man 2 evenings ago and were brought home in the dusk by your own stepmother, and there will be no recovering from it." She drew a glove smooth along her fingers. "I am being merciful. Again, you might thank me." "The Queen entered my name," Rosalind said. "You heard her do it. The Queen has 200 names to forget by Michaelmas, and a kingdom besides yours to mind." But something moved behind the dove grey calm, and Rosalind, who had spent 3 years learning the small movements people made when surer of their words than their hearts, saw it. "Stay in your room, Rosalind. It is the safest place left to you. Possibly the last." She went out. The key turned in the lock from the outside, a thing she had never troubled to do before, in 3 years, and the turning of it told Rosalind more than any speech could have. Augusta was not managing a wayward girl. Augusta was barring a door against a flood she could already hear coming up the stairs. It was Mrs. Finch who came at noon, mustard turban first, and this time she did not trouble the footman at all. There was a scuffle of voices in the area below, the cook's and another's, and then the small grind of the kitchen bolt, and then the old lady's tread upon the back stair, slow and triumphant, a moral exercise conquered. She arrived at the attic door pink and breathless, and let herself in with a hairpin, which she returned to her turban afterward with great satisfaction. "Locked," she observed. How very stupid of her. A lock tells the whole house there is something inside worth keeping. "Sit down, child. You look like the underside of a leaf. I have a great deal to say, and a hired chair eating its head off in the street, so attend. How did you? Your cook and I have an understanding of long standing, founded upon my recipe for elderflower cordial, which is better than hers and which she covets." "Never mind that." Mrs. Finch lowered herself onto the single chair and fixed Rosalind with her bright apple eyes. "3 things. Your Duke has not been idle. He went to a lawyer in Lincoln's Inn yesterday morning and stayed 4 hours, and came out with a clerk carrying a box, and went from there to wait upon the Queen a second time, which no man does for the pleasure of it. Second, the whole town is going to Wexcombe tonight. The whole town. The Earl flung his doors wide a month ago for his daughter's triumph, and now the triumph has turned into the only theatre in London, because everyone has read the same news, and everyone means to see how it ends. And the third?" The old lady's face gentled. "The third is a command, child, not a rumour. There is a card downstairs your stepmother has not let you see. I had it from the parlour-maid, who is wholly mine since the cottage business, and would carry a coal to me in her teeth if I asked. It is from the Lord Chamberlain's office. Her Majesty desires the attendance of Miss Rosalind Vane at the Earl of Wexcombe's reception this evening." She let that lie a moment in the hot still room. "Her Majesty desires it. Your dragon cannot lock that door, Rosalind. She can only hope you never learn it stands open." Rosalind sat very still. Below, the knocker went again, and was answered, and went silent. Then I am to walk into the one room in England where every soul who matters will be watching for my ruin, she said slowly, by the command of the Queen, in a gown 3 years old. To stand between a man who hunted my father's papers and a woman who has stolen something from me I cannot even name. Yes, said Mrs. Finch, and I have brought the gown. You, Amber Silk. My dear, that my own girl has sat up 2 nights over. Cut down from a thing I wore when George III was a hopeful young man, and let out where you have more of you than I ever had. It is the colour of the light at 4 o'clock, which seemed to me apt, though I could not have told you why. She rose, brisk, and her voice cracked just once on the next of it, and she let it. I buried everyone I ever loved, Rosalind Vane, and outlived the lot, and the one use I have found for a long and useless life is to stand behind a girl with a straight back and say, go. So, go. The Earl of Wexcombe's great house on Arlington Street blazed against the violet dusk, like a thing built of light. The heat of the day had at last begun to lift, and a faint river-cooled air came up the street, carrying the smell of hot wax and crushed flowers and the dust of 100 carriage wheels, and the windows stood open from the pavement to the parapet, with the gold of 1,000 candles pouring out of them. Rosalind stepped down from Mrs. Finch's hired chair into the torchlight, and the amber silk caught the flame and held it, and a footman in powder bowed her up the steps as though she had been born to them. She had not told Augustus she was coming. She had simply come. The great staircase climbed through banks of summer roses and forced lilies that made the air thick and sweet to the point of swooning, and at the head of it stood the receiving line, the Earl of Wexcombe, silver-headed and stiff with importance, beside him his daughter, Lady Sabrina Court, in white this evening, ice-white, with diamonds in her fair hair and not a flaw in her composure, and the press of the Tun flowing past them into the lit rooms beyond. The chamberlain's man murmured at Rosalind's elbow, and a name was given, her name, and it went down the line ahead of her like a struck note, and she saw the heads begin to turn. Miss Vane. The Earl looked at her as a man looks at a creditor he had hoped never to receive. You are expected, it seems, by a higher authority than mine in my own house. I am sorry to be the cause of any awkwardness, my lord, Rosalind said, and meant it, and saw the truth of it puzzle him. I had as soon have stayed at home with my flowers. But one does not decline the Queen. No, he said heavily, one does not. And he passed her along. Sabrina Court regarded her from a height of perfect breeding, and the diamonds threw little knives of light across her cheek, and for a moment the two of them stood in the river of silk and stared at one another, with the whole listening room straining to hear what would pass. You wore amber, Sabrina said at last. Lo, it suits you. I had hoped, I confess, that you would wear the muslin again, and spare me the trouble of disliking you. You need not dislike me, my lady. I told you by the water. I am not your rival, and I told you there were things you did not know. Something flickered in the cold, pretty face, and it was not malice, it was closer to weariness. I have learned 1 or 2 of them myself since, this very afternoon, which is why I have not yet had you put out of my father's house. Go in, Miss Vane. He is here. They are all here, and I find, she lifted her chin, every inch the daughter of an earl who had expected to be a duchess since the nursery, I find I would rather see the truth come out cleanly than wear a crown that was stolen for me. Go in. Rosalind went in. The long saloon ran the depth of the house, gold and white and crowded to the walls, and the heat of the candles and the bodies and the late summer evening lay over it like a hand. She saw Honoria first, oyster satin again, hovering miserable at the edge of a group that had plainly stopped speaking when she neared it. She saw Augusta a half-second later, Augusta turning, sensing the shift in the room as a spider senses the wire, and going the colour of tallow as she found Rosalind framed in the doorway in amber silk, with the candlelight loving her, and the whole company beginning, slowly, to part. And at the far end, beneath a great Venetian glass that doubled all the flames, she saw Gabriel. He stood with a lawyer's clerk at his shoulder and a flat japanned box under the clerk's arm, and he was already looking at her, the way he had looked across the Queen's floor, as though the crowd were a field of standing wheat and she the only stone in it. He did not smile. He inclined his head, once, a small grave courtesy that the whole room saw and could make nothing of, and then he began to come toward her down the length of the saloon, and the company drew back from his path of its own accord. And Rosalind understood that whatever was to happen tonight, it would happen here, in the full blaze, before everyone, because that was the only place he had decided it could honestly be done. Augusta reached her first. "You wretched, ungrateful." The words came under the music, scarcely moving her lips, the old venom, but cracked now with fright. I locked the door. "Mrs. Finch keeps a hairpin," Rosalind said, "and the Queen keeps a longer memory than you allowed her. Stand aside, Augusta. I am commanded here, and I mean to learn at last what it is you have spent 3 years and a locked door keeping from me. You will learn nothing but your own ruin." But Augusta's hand had found her wrist, the old place, and the grip this time was not cruelty. It was a hand clutching at a rail above deep water. Whatever he says, whatever that box holds, it is a forgery, a malice, a duke's lie to cover a duke's lust. Say it with me. Say it now, loudly, before he speaks, and you may yet save us both. Save us. Rosalind looked down at the gloved fingers on her wrist, and then up into her stepmother's beautiful, terrified face, and felt the last of the old folding small fall away from her like a husk. There is no us, Augusta. There never was. There was only you, and a thing of mine in your keeping. I think I am about to be told what it is. Gabriel stopped before them. Close to, in the gold light, the small white seam she had stitched above his brow showed plainly, and his grave dark eyes went over her face once as though to be sure of her, and then he turned, deliberately, so that he stood at her side and faced the room, and lifted his voice, not loud, never loud, but pitched to carry to the cornices, the voice that did not need the room quiet, though the room had gone quiet for it all the same. "My lords. Ladies." A breath. The chandeliers hissed. 2 evenings ago I bowed before the Queen of England to this lady, and London has spent 2 days asking why a duke should so disorder himself for a portionless girl in an old gown. I am come tonight to answer it, in the house of the Earl of Wexcombe before you all, because the answer is not a romance and not a scandal. It is an account. It is owed, and it has been kept from the one person on earth with the right to it for 3 years, by deliberate hands. "This is monstrous," Augusta said, but her voice would not carry past the nearest shoulders. "Wexcombe, this is your house. Will you let a guest be slandered in it? Let him speak," said the Earl of Wexcombe, who had come up behind, grey and grim, with his daughter white beside him. "By God, madam, I have given my house to this business. I will hear it out." Gabriel turned to the clerk and took from the japanned box a folded instrument of stiff parchment, ribboned and sealed, yellowed at the creases, and he held it, but did not yet open it. "My father," he said, and for the first time the even voice roughened, was a friend of Sir Henry Vane, of Vane Abbas, these 30 years. When Sir Henry married, his first marriage, to Miss Mary Aldous, a lady of small fortune but the great love of his life, a settlement was drawn, as settlements are, and a portion fixed, £12,000, the bride's whole dowry and her mother's before her, settled not upon Sir Henry, and not upon any wife who might come after, but upon the children of that marriage, upon the issue of Mary Aldous. His eyes did not leave the room. There was one child of that marriage. There was one daughter. Her name is written in this deed in her father's own hand. The silence had become a thing with weight. Rosalind felt it pressing on her chest. She heard her own blood. Trustees were named to hold that portion against her coming of age, or her marriage. Whichever fell first, Gabriel went on. 2 trustees. One was Sir Henry's man of business, who has long since passed his work and remembers nothing. The other, he turned the deed in his hand, and the seal caught the light. The other was my father, the late Duke of Ashbourne, who took the charge as men take a friend's charge, and then, in the slow failing of his last years, let it slip his mind as 100 such charges slip the minds of failing men. When Sir Henry was laid in the churchyard at Vane Abbas 3 summers ago, no trustee came forward, because one could not, and one had forgotten. And into that silence, now, at last, he looked at Augusta, stepped the second Lady Vane, who produced a later settlement, made over to her, and let it be understood by every soul too kind, or too idle to question it, that the whole estate, the portion with it, had passed to her. It had not. It could not. £12,000 of it was never Sir Henry's to leave, and never hers to take. It belonged, from the day of a wedding before this lady was ever heard of, to Mary Aldous' daughter, to Rosalind. A sound went through the saloon like wind over wheat, the same sound the drawing-room had made, doubled, trebled, 100 fans freezing half furled. Lies, Augusta said, but it came out high and thin. Where is this deed sprung from, after 3 years? A duke wishes to wed a nobody, and conjures a fortune to make her fit. Anyone may see the trick of it. It was sprung, Gabriel said, from my father's strong-box at Ashbourne, where it had lain since the year Sir Henry brought it to him for safekeeping. Brought it to him, madam, in person, because, in his own written words on the cover, he did not trust the lady he had married to deal honestly by the child of the wife he had buried. He held the parchment out, across the small charged space, to Rosalind. It is yours. It was always yours. Read it, and let them hear you read it, so that no one in this room can ever again say you were given a thing instead of taking back your own. Her hands were not steady. She made them steady. She took the deed, heavy, cool, the parchment grained under her gloves like skin, the broken wax of the old seal flaking faintly to the floor, and she unfolded it in the light of 1,000 candles, and found her father's hand, that she had not seen in 3 years. The loops of it she had learned her own letters copying. She read, and her voice came out low at first and then clear, clear enough to carry. To be held by the said trustees in trust for the sole and separate use and benefit of the daughter of the said marriage, Rosalind Mary Vane, the same to be paid to her upon her attaining the age of 21 years, or upon the day of her marriage, free of the control of any person whomsoever. She lifted her eyes from the page. Free of the control of any person whomsoever. My father wrote that. He wrote it for me. He knew. The deed trembled in her hand, and she let it. Across the small space her stepmother had gone perfectly white, perfectly still, the dove-grey silk and the jet at her throat suddenly the morning of her own undoing, and around her the room had drawn back so that she stood alone in a widening ring of polished floor, as the truth of 3 years arranged itself in 200 minds at once. You knew, Rosalind said to her, and it was not a question. Every quarter you counted out my pin money. Every time you told me I was here on sufferance, a second pair of hands for Honoria's train, a girl who smelled of the still-room, you knew there were £12,000 of mine in your keeping that you had hidden, and you let me believe I was a charity you grudged. You sewed me into 3-year-old muslin out of money that was mine. It was the estate's, Augusta whispered. It was needed. Honoria's season, the house, you have no notion what it costs to hold a position. It was a child's portion, settled by a man on the daughter of the wife he loved, and you spent it on plumes. The Earl of Wexcombe's voice fell like a gavel. Madam, there is a word for what you have done, and it is not a drawing-room word. There will be lawyers on you before the week is out. You may be very glad if it stops at lawyers. He turned from her as from something soiling the air. Ashbourne, you have the second trustee's hand to this? The man of business? His sworn deposition is in the box, my lord, taken yesterday before 2 witnesses, confirming the deed and his own failure to act. The matter is past argument. The portion will be restored to Miss Vane entire, with 3 years' interest. Before the courts are ever troubled, I have the Lady Augusta's jointure to charge it against, and charge it I will, to the last farthing. It was over for Augusta, and she knew it. Rosalind watched the knowledge go through her stepmother, the way the larkspur smell went through a warm room, slow and total. Augusta did not weep. Rosalind had never once seen her weep, and did not see it now. She drew herself up instead, and drew one glove smooth along her fingers, finger by finger, the old cutting gesture made meaningless, a habit performing itself over a ruin. Then she gathered the dove-grey silk, and walked from the saloon through a company that did not part for her now, but simply, terribly, let her pass, and Honoria, after one wild, frightened look about her, gathered her oyster satin, and fled after her mother into the dark of the stair. And Rosalind found herself standing in the gold blaze, with £12,000 of her own restored to her in a sheet of her father's writing, and the whole of the ton looking at her not as a spectacle now, but as a person, an heiress, a wronged daughter set right. And she discovered that her hands had begun, quietly and without her leave, to shake. "Breathe," said Gabriel, for her alone, very low. "You have done the hard part again. You stood. You might," she said, on a breath that was half a laugh and half something nearer breaking, "have warned me I should have to read aloud." The room was loud again now, talk breaking over them in a warm tide, the Earl of Wexcombe drawing off a knot of grave men to murmur of lawyers and depositions, the music starting up once more at the saloon's far end, as though the floor of the world had not just been relaid. Gabriel drew her, with a hand that did not quite touch her arm, through a tall window standing open onto a stone balcony above the garden, where the river-cooled night came up at last out of the dark, and the noise fell behind them to a murmur, and the heat-stunned stocks below sent up their sweetness through the iron rail. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Below, a fountain she could hear, but not see ran, and ran over its stone. The sky had gone deep blue at last, the last of the long midsummer light dying out of the west, and one star stood over the chimney-pots. "You did not tell me the whole of it at the gate," Rosalind said. "You let me walk away believing the worst, rather than spill it where Augusta could hear." "If I had said it at the gate, with her standing there," he answered, "she would have had the night and the morning to reach the deed before I did. To send word north, to suborn the old man of business, to put a flame to her own copy and swear there had never been another. I had one chance to lay it out whole, where she could not unpick it, before witnesses too many to silence. I could not buy your trust with the very thing that would have lost you your fortune." He turned to her, and the balcony lamp lit one side of his grave face. "So I let you think me a schemer one day more. It was the hardest cowardice of all the cowardices I have shown you, Rosalind, and I am not certain even now it was not also the only honest thing I had to give. You may judge it. You have the right of all the judgment between us." She looked at him a long moment in the blue dark. "You came to Wiltshire for the deed," she said, "in April. Knowing my name, I came for the deed. I found my father had wronged a friend's child by forgetting her, and I could not let it stand. That is the truth and the whole beginning of it. I rode into your lane meaning to call at the great house, make my inquiries, set the law in motion, and ride home a man who had paid a dead father's debt." His mouth moved, not quite a smile, and a hired horse threw me in a flooded lane in the storm, and I crawled to the nearest light, and the nearest light was a gardener's cottage, where a girl I had come to make rich out of duty sat up 3 nights to keep a penniless stranger named Mercer from slipping his moorings, wanting nothing of me, not my name, which I would not give, nor my fortune, which she could not guess, nor anything under heaven but that I should live to see the 4 o'clock light again. Now he did look at her, fully. Do you understand what that was to me? I have been weighed and priced since I was breeched. You weighed me at nothing but whether I drew breath in the morning. I left you sleeping because my father was failing and I had hours to reach him. and I told myself a week. And it was 2 months, and a dukedom, and I came back to find they had carried you off to be a drudge at the back of a London ballroom. You, with £12,000 of your own that woman was sitting on like a stone. So no, I did not come to that lane for love. I went out of it loving you, and I have done every clumsy, public, headlong thing since for the single reason that I could not bear the world to put you at the back of one more room. The fountain ran. The stocks breathed up their sweetness. Somewhere behind them a violin found the start of a slow air. Say the rest of it, Rosalind said, very quietly. You have said a great deal. Say the small thing under all of it, and then I will tell you mine. I love you, Gabriel said. I have loved you since the 3rd night, when you fell asleep in the chair with a bowl of broth gone cold in your lap and your hand still on my wrist counting the beat of me without knowing you did it. I did not bow to you before the Queen to make you a spectacle, whatever it cost you, and I am sorry for the cost. I bowed because it was the truest thing I knew, and I was tired to my soul of small, quiet truths spoken in corners. You are not at the back of the room, Rosalind. You never were. The whole room had simply got itself turned the wrong way about. She felt the last knot in her, the 1 3 years and 2 months in the tying, come loose all at once, and she did not crush the thing rising in her chest now, did not fold it small, did not make her face lie. She let it show, all of it, here in the lamplight, where anyone strolling the balcony might see, and the showing was the most reckless and the most free act of her life. I told you by the water, she said, that I had spent quite enough of my life loving a man I had to assemble out of guesses. I find I no longer have to guess. She lifted the deed, still in her gloved hand, her father's writing pale in the lamplight. My father knew what she was, and he could not save me from her while he lived, so he reached past her with this and trusted your father to hold it. And your father forgot, and you remembered. I have spent 3 years believing no one in the world would ever put the truth into my hand, Gabriel, and here it is, in my hand, and you are the one who put it there. Her voice did not quite hold, and she let it not hold. I love you. I have, I think, since the cottage, and I called myself a fool for it every day. And I was not a fool. I was only early. He took her hand, the one not holding the deed, and turned it over, and pressed his mouth once to the inside of her wrist. Exactly where, 3 nights running in a cold May, her fingers had counted the life in him. It was the whole of it. In a Regency garden, with the Tun murmuring beyond the window and a Queen's command still warm in the air, it was everything, and they both knew it, and neither of them needed more. There is a condition, she said, when she could, since the fashion is for plainness at garden gates and balcony rails. Name it. My £12,000 is mine, free of the control of any person whomsoever, my father wrote it, and I mean to hold him to it. When I marry you, it does not become yours to spend on plumes or border drains or anything else. Some of it builds a still room and a glass house at Ashbourne with a north light, where I shall grow bee orchids and larkspur and be of no use whatever to the dignity of the house. The rest of it is mine to do good or harm with as I please, and I shall not ask you which. Gabriel was quiet a moment. Then the grave mouth did, at last, what she had only twice seen it do. It curved, slow and dry, the rare warmth coming up under the reserve like sun through deep water. A duchess with her own fortune, and a glass house full of orchids, and no respect for the dignity of the house, he said. My aunts will take to their beds for a fortnight. I find I should like to watch them do it. He inclined his head, the deep, deliberate bow of the drawing-room, made now to her alone in the lamplit dark. Your terms, Miss Vane, every one. I learned in your cottage what it is to be wanted for nothing. I have no intention of learning, at this late hour, to want you for less than the whole of yourself. They were married in September, when the first leaves were turning on the limes along the Wiltshire lane, and the harvest stood in Stook's gold against the chalk. It was a quiet wedding by the measure of dukes, in the small grey church at Vane Abbas, where Sir Henry lay, and Mrs. Tabitha Finch sat in the front pew, in a new turban, the colour of a marigold, and wept without the smallest shame, and told everyone within reach that she had made the whole thing herself out of a hairpin and a length of amber silk, which was very nearly true. Lady Sabrina Court did not come, but she sent a note in a cold, clear hand that said only, "I had rather have given him up to a true thing than kept him by a false one. Be happy, and grow your orchids, and do not name a single one of them after me." Her father's borderlands were drained that winter all the same, for Gabriel paid for the new road and the mill at Heatherby out of his own purse, and called it a wedding gift to the north, so that no tenant along 40 miles felt the want of a marriage that never came. And the proud Earl, who had expected a son-in-law and got instead an honest neighbour, found in time that he could bear it. Of Augusta there is little kind to tell, and Rosalind, in the end, told little. The portion was restored entire, with its interest charged to the jointure as Gabriel had promised, and Lady Augusta Vane retired on a much diminished income to the spa town of her birth, where she has a small set of rooms and a fan of painted ivory and the society of others like herself, and where, it is said, she still draws her gloves smooth finger by finger before she speaks, though there is no one left now whom it frightens. Honoria, who had been frightened too, and had fled the saloon at her mother's heels, wrote once to Rosalind that winter, a stiff, unhappy, half-ashamed little letter, and Rosalind, who had learned in a still room that even the hardest seed will sometimes take if you give it light and do not press it, wrote back kindly, and asked her to come at Christmas, and meant it. There is a glass house at Ashbourne now, built against the old south wall where the heat gathers, with a separate still room beside it that takes the north light. On a fine afternoon in the following June, a year to the month from the night a duke bowed to a still room made before the Queen of England, the Duchess of Ashbourne might have been found there in a faded apron, with chalk dust on her hands, easing a bee orchid from its pot, while the long light came slanting through the glass and lay gold across the staging. A footstep on the gravel. She did not need to turn. She knew the weight of it now as once she had known the beat of a stranger's wrist under her fingers. "It is 4 o'clock," Gabriel said behind her. He had a sprig of blue larkspur in his hand, fresh cut, the dew of the watering can still on it, and he laid it on the bench beside her work the way a man lays down a thing he has carried a long way. "I am told the light is worth observing, at 4 o'clock, through the right window. I had it from a very reliable woman once, in a cottage, when I had nothing in the world but a false name and a broken head, and she nursed me anyway." Rosalind set down the orchid and wiped her hands and turned, and the gold light caught her hair the way the candlelight had once. And there was no queen now, and no court, and no order of precedence written in blood and centuries, only the warm glass house, and the smell of crushed leaves, and the two of them, and a sprig of larkspur on a bench, pressed flat at last between the right two hands. "Stay with your kind," she said softly, and smiled, and reached for him. "I believe, Your Grace, I finally have." And outside the glass, the long Wiltshire afternoon poured itself out gold over the chalk, and somewhere a thrush ran through its evening phrases over and over, as though, this time, it had every reason in the world never to let them go.